Welcome to HardScript.
Help me reach 5,000 subscribers. Support the video with a like and leave your thoughts in the comments. I found out about the messages on a Thursday night. Not by accident, by habit. I work in cybersecurity. Catching anomalies is what I do. Her phone had synced to our shared MacBook after a recent update. I wasn't snooping. I was checking a log. But there it was, Facebook Messenger lighting up like a flare in the dark. A name I recognized. Matt, her co-worker from marketing. The preview read, "Your trouble." Then her reply, "Only if you ask nicely. My name's Ethan Cole, 37, IT security analyst at a defense contractor in Raleigh, North Carolina. I don't lose my temper. I don't jump to conclusions. I verify." So I opened the chat. I expected harmless work banter. What I found was weeks of flirt disguised as wit, inside jokes, heart emojis, late-night messages. And then, the one line that hit like a stun grenade. "I'd risk it if you would." My wife, Amanda, PR manager at a local firm, always said flirting was part of her job. "It's just communication," she'd laugh. "You're too logical to get it." Maybe. But logic doesn't lie. The timestamps didn't, either. Messages sent from our living room while I was on the couch beside her, watching Netflix, believing she was scrolling through emails. I didn't confront her that night. Instead, I copied the conversation, saved it to a secure folder, and sat there, staring at the screen's reflection. She was upstairs, brushing her teeth, humming something off-key. I remember thinking how normal it all sounded. That was the worst part, the normalcy. The next morning, she left early for what she called a team lunch at Chick-fil-A. I checked her phone's location. Same place. Same name checked in on Facebook. Matt. Lunch with him wasn't the problem. The lie about it was. That night, when she got home, I asked her straight, "Who's Matt?" She froze for a split second, too brief for anyone else to notice, but not for me. Then she laughed. "Oh God, Ethan. You're not jealous, are you? It's just texting." Just texting. I didn't reply. I just nodded and went back to my desk. While she watched her show, I drafted an email, attached one image, the screenshot with her words, "I'd risk it if you would," and typed a single address in the to field, her father's. But I didn't hit send. Not yet. Quiet isn't about rage. It's about timing. And mine had just begun. I spent the weekend pretending everything was fine. Pretending is easy when you've spent years training your face not to reveal what your mind already knows. Amanda talked about work, about a new client, about how exhausted she was from too many meetings. I nodded at the right moments, brewed coffee, fixed the Wi-Fi when it glitched. From the outside, we looked like any couple on a quiet Saturday. From the inside, I was running diagnostics on a marriage that had already failed the integrity test. Sunday afternoon, she fell asleep on the couch with Netflix murmuring in the background. I sat at my desk, opened my encrypted drive, and reviewed everything again. The timestamps, the photos, the tone. I wasn't looking for more evidence. I already had enough. I was studying behavior. The way her messages evolved from humor to intimacy. The shift from LOL to wish you were here. There's a pattern to betrayal, the same way there's a pattern to intrusion attempts. It always starts small, then grows bold when it goes unnoticed. That night, she mentioned her parents were coming into town next week. Her father, a retired police officer, idolized her. "He still calls you the perfect husband," she joked. I smiled, because that line sealed it for me. She cared more about appearances than truth. And I was done protecting appearances. Monday morning, I left for work early, but drove instead to Home Depot. I bought moving boxes and heavy-duty tape. Told myself it was just preparation, not decision. In my line of work, you never act impulsively. You build layers of control. I spent the rest of the day monitoring firewall logs at the office, but every alert reminded me of her message. "I'd risk it if you would." She had, and I was about to respond in kind. When I got home that evening, she was on the phone, laughing softly. She said it was her friend from work, but the way she glanced at her screen before answering told me everything. I sat in the kitchen, let the silence stretch, and felt something cold settle in my chest. Not anger, clarity. By midnight, the boxes were lined up in the garage. I'd packed just the essentials, documents, clothes, my laptop. Before bed, I looked at her sleeping face one last time. She thought she was safe in her story. She didn't know I'd already written the ending. By Tuesday, the plan had crystallized. I wasn't going to argue, accuse, or explain. Words only feed denial, and she was fluent in it. My silence would do more damage than confrontation ever could. Amanda had a habit of leaving her work laptop open when she got home, confident in her own charm, careless with privacy. That night, after she fell asleep, I mirrored her device to mine using a remote access protocol most people wouldn't even notice. It took seconds. From that moment on, every message she sent on Facebook Messenger appeared on my screen in real time. The next 2 days confirmed everything. The flirty tone escalated, the jokes got bolder, and by Thursday, she sent a selfie, playful, tilted head, the kind of photo meant to provoke, not to communicate. Matt replied with a heart emoji and a line that made me pause. If you weren't married, her reply came fast. Don't start. But she didn't end it. She wanted to be wanted. That's all. She didn't crave him. She craved the mirror he held up. At work, I ran penetration tests on firewalls and pretended not to check my phone every few minutes. She texted me sweet messages between her chats with him, small gestures to keep the illusion intact. I let her, because now I was building something stronger than anger, a record. Every file, every message, time-stamped and backed up. Evidence not for revenge, but for truth. On Friday evening, she called to say she'd be late. Team dinner, she said. I checked her GPS location again. Chick-fil-A, same as before. I imagined her laughing across the table from him, calling it harmless. She had no idea I was watching the digital reflection of every lie. When she came home that night, I asked one question. Are you happy? She smiled, maybe thinking it was affection. Of course. Why? I just nodded. Good. That was the last conversation we'd ever have as husband and wife. Later that night, I opened my email draft again. The message was still there, waiting, one screenshot, one address. I hovered over send, then closed the laptop. Not yet. Timing, precision, and quiet. Those 3 things win wars. And this wasn't about ending something. It was about closing it perfectly. Saturday morning felt staged, like I was watching a play I'd already memorized. Amanda made pancakes, laughed at something on her phone, asked if I wanted to go to Target later. I watched her move around the kitchen in the same sweatshirt she wore the night before texting him. The difference was invisible to her, but not to me. I saw the small hesitations, the moments she looked at her phone before setting it face down, the quick smiles that didn't include me anymore. Every movement told the story she refused to say out loud. After breakfast, she went upstairs to get ready for brunch with a friend. I opened her laptop again, mirrored the messages, and saw the latest one. Matt had written, "Miss seeing that smile today." She'd replied, "You'll see it Monday." No emojis this time. Just words, simple, but intimate in a way that stripped all her defenses. I took a screenshot, labeled it, and closed the window. That was the one. The message that made everything real. When she came down, she asked if I needed anything from Walmart. I told her no. She kissed my cheek, casual, like it was habit. I watched her car back out of the driveway, then stood there for a while, looking at the empty space where her car had been. It wasn't sadness I felt. It was relief. The pretending was over. That afternoon, I started packing in earnest. The boxes from Home Depot were already stacked in the garage. I filled them quietly. Clothes, my old MacBook, a few framed photos that still meant something. I didn't leave notes, didn't touch her things. I moved like I was leaving a scene, not a marriage. By evening, everything I needed fit into the trunk of my Toyota Camry. Before bed, she curled up next to me like always, scrolling her phone, laughing at something I didn't ask about. I stared at the ceiling and waited for the right moment. When she finally drifted off, I opened my laptop, attached the screenshot, and hit send. One message, one truth, delivered to the man who'd always called me the steady one. Then I closed the laptop, turned off the light, and listened to the quiet. It was the sound of something ending without breaking. The next morning began like any other Sunday. Sunlight through the blinds, the smell of coffee, the quiet hum of the neighborhood. Amanda was still asleep when my phone buzzed. One unread email. The reply came faster than I expected. Her father had written 3 words. We need to talk. No greeting, no signature, just finality. I imagined the moment he opened it, the disbelief, the silence before realization. He adored her, always had. To him, she was flawless. That illusion had just shattered. Amanda stirred beside me, oblivious. She smiled, mumbled something about breakfast, and went downstairs. I followed, calm, detached. She poured 2 cups of coffee, handed me one, and started scrolling through her phone. I could see the shift in her face when she noticed the missed call from her father. Her voice rose slightly when she said she'd call him later. But later came fast. Her phone rang again. She answered, cheerful at first, then quiet. Her posture changed. Her face drained of color. I didn't need to hear his words to know what he was saying. She turned to me slowly, eyes wide, confusion and fear tangled together. "What did you do?" she whispered. I didn't answer. There was nothing to explain. I picked up my keys, walked to the garage, and opened the door. She followed, still in disbelief, asking why, how, what this would solve. I let her words dissolve into the air. Sometimes silence is louder than shouting. Outside, the morning was bright, too bright for the kind of ending this was. I loaded the last box into the Camry, set my coffee in the cup holder, and looked back once. She stood in the doorway, barefoot, phone clutched like a lifeline, realizing too late that the problem wasn't the message, it was the meaning. She'd built her world on attention. I dismantled it with exposure. As I pulled away, the quiet followed me. No yelling, no chasing, no scene. Just the steady hum of the tires and the soft ping of another message on my phone. I didn't check it. Whatever she had to say no longer mattered. I'd already said everything I needed to, with one screenshot, one truth, and absolute silence. I didn't drive far that morning, just enough to let distance turn into quiet. I stopped at a Walmart on the edge of town, bought a cheap duffel bag, a travel mug, and a pack of instant coffee. The cashier smiled and asked if I was heading somewhere. I said, yeah, somewhere new. That was the closest thing to a confession I'd spoken in days. Back in the parking lot, I poured the coffee, sat in the car, and watched people go in and out. Families, couples, all of them moving through the kind of ordinary life I'd just left behind. Amanda called 5 times before noon. I didn't answer. Then her texts started. Questions, apologies, disbelief. By afternoon, the messages changed tone. Anger now, confusion wrapped in desperation. I muted the thread. Silence isn't avoidance, it's control. When people lose your reaction, they lose their power. I booked a small Airbnb a few towns over. No photos, no personal connection, just a place to disappear. That night, I sat by the window, phone face down, and thought about her father. He was probably replaying every moment, trying to make sense of it. In a way, he deserved the truth more than she did. He'd always told me honesty was what defined a man. I'd simply followed that logic. The next morning, I opened my laptop, logged into my work account, and sent a resignation email. No explanations, no forward address. I'd already lined up freelance work. Cybersecurity is one of those fields where ghosts are useful. When I closed the laptop, I realized how light I felt. For the first time in years, my world wasn't built around someone else's image management. Around dusk, Amanda sent one final message. You ruined me. I stared at it for a while, then deleted the thread. I hadn't ruined her. I'd just stopped protecting the version of her she wanted everyone else to believe in. Truth isn't destruction, it's exposure. Outside, the world was quiet again, just the hum of passing cars and the fading orange light across the parking lot. I finished my coffee, started the engine, and drove toward nothing specific. Sometimes the cleanest break is the one that leaves no trace at all. By the third day, the silence had settled into something almost comfortable. My phone stayed off. The world shrank to a small-town motel, a few unread emails, and the sound of my own thoughts. I'd expected guilt to show up by now, maybe regret, but all I felt was clarity. It's strange how peace sometimes arrives disguised as loss. Amanda's father called once. I didn't answer, but I listened to the voicemail. His voice was steady, but there was weight in it. He said he understood why I did it. He said she was at their house, crying, trying to explain. Then he paused before saying, "You did what I couldn't." I replayed that line a few times, unsure whether it was approval or sorrow. Maybe both. I spent the rest of that day setting up a new number, new accounts, a clean digital slate. Old habits die hard. I built my own digital disappearance with the same precision I'd used to erase a data breach. I knew she'd try to find me. She'd always been more concerned about perception than truth. But she wouldn't get the satisfaction of closure. That was mine to keep. One evening, I drove out to a diner off the highway. No one there knew me. I sat by the window, ate in silence, and watched the reflection of the neon sign flicker across my phone screen. I thought about how simple it all was in the end. One message, one truth. I didn't need revenge. I just needed her to face the version of herself she'd hidden behind jokes and winks. When I got back to the motel, I saw her name one last time in my inbox. The subject line read, "Why him?" I didn't open it. I deleted it without reading a single word. The point wasn't about him anymore. It never was. It was about respect, the quiet kind, the kind that's earned by silence, not demanded by noise. That night, I finally slept. No dreams, no questions, no noise. Just quiet, the same kind I'd been chasing without knowing it. The kind that doesn't need anyone else's permission to exist. A week passed before I saw my reflection clearly again. It happened one morning at a gas station outside Asheville. I caught my own eyes in the side mirror of the car and almost didn't recognize them. They looked older, calmer, but sharper somehow. It's strange how losing everything unnecessary makes you look more like yourself. I bought a coffee, filled the tank, and checked into a small rental cabin by the woods. It was quiet, no neighbors, no signal strong enough for notifications. Exactly what I needed. For the first few days, I didn't touch a screen. No laptop, no phone, no noise. Just air, trees, and silence. When you work in cybersecurity, you learn to live surrounded by chaos, pings, alerts, constant threats. But sitting there, watching light cut through fog, I realized how much of my life had been spent defending systems that didn't matter. The only breach that counted had already happened, and I'd walked out of it alive. Her father called again a few days later. This time I answered. He said she'd moved back home, that she'd stopped going to work. He didn't sound angry, just disappointed, like a man who finally saw the cracks in something he'd spent a lifetime believing in. He said, "She'll carry this for a while." I told him I wasn't looking for her to suffer. "I know," he said, "but truth has a weight, son. Once you lift it, someone has to carry it." Then he hung up. That night, I drove into town for dinner. The waitress smiled, asked if I was passing through. I said, "Maybe," and left it at that. On the way back, I stopped by a quiet overlook. Below me, headlights stretched like veins through the dark. Somewhere down there, she was probably telling her version of the story, rewriting it to make sense of it. Let her. People always need a villain to forgive themselves. I leaned against the car, drank the last of my coffee, and listened to the night. No messages, no noise, no explanations. Just the sound of my own breathing, steady and unhurried. For the first time in years, I wasn't waiting for anything. 2 months passed before I turned my phone back on. The screen lit up with a flood of old messages, but one caught my attention. It wasn't from her. It was from a former coworker. He wrote that Amanda had left the company, that the story about her innocent texting had somehow leaked through the office. People whispered. Some defended her. Most didn't. I didn't feel satisfaction, just distance. What happens to someone after you stop protecting their illusion isn't revenge, it's exposure to air. And air always shows what's been rotting underneath. I started freelancing again, quietly, taking contracts that didn't require a name attached. I rebuilt my work from scratch. No office politics, no forced smiles, no explaining why my phone stayed silent during lunch. It was just work, clean, detached, efficient. And somehow, that felt closer to living than anything I'd done in years. One evening, while sorting through photos on my old laptop, I found a folder labeled Home. Inside were pictures from our first year together. Trips, laughs, dinners we couldn't afford but made happen anyway. For a second, I almost believed in those moments again. But then I noticed the small things I'd missed before. The way she always looked slightly away from the camera, like her mind was already somewhere else. Maybe it had been from the start. Some people don't cheat out of desire. They cheat out of emptiness. Her father sent one last message not long after. He said she'd found a new apartment, was trying to get better, whatever that meant. Then he thanked me, not for leaving, but for telling the truth. It woke her up, he said. Maybe too late, but still. I didn't respond. Some things don't need acknowledgement. That night, I drove to a quiet diner outside the city, the kind that smells like burnt coffee and old stories. The waitress poured a refill, smiled without asking questions. In the corner booth, I watched strangers talk about their days, about small things that still mattered. For the first time, I realized I wasn't angry anymore. The silence I'd built wasn't loneliness. It was peace wearing armor. And I wasn't done rebuilding yet. Winter came quietly that year, soft and clean, the way endings should arrive. By then I'd moved again. Small apartment, no neighbors who asked questions, no reminders of who I used to be. My work was steady, remote, silent. I liked the quiet. It didn't demand explanations. It didn't lie. Most days started the same. Black coffee, a walk before sunrise, and the sound of the city still half asleep. No one knew my story here, and that anonymity felt like freedom. One night, months later, I got a letter in the mail. No return address, just my name written in handwriting I knew too well. Inside, a single page. She wrote that she finally understood what I'd done, not the action, but the reason. She said it broke her to realize that the silence afterward hurt more than any argument could have. "You didn't expose me to punish me," she wrote. "You exposed me so I'd see myself." There was no apology, just acknowledgement. And that was enough. I folded the letter once, set it on the counter, and let it sit there until morning. Then I threw it away. Sometimes I wonder what would have happened if I'd never checked those logs, if I'd ignored the signs like most people do when comfort is easier than truth. But then I remember the feeling of that first morning after leaving. The weight that lifted, the quiet that stayed. You don't unsee deception. You either live with it or you step out of it. I chose to step out. Now, when I think of her, I don't see betrayal. I see distance. The kind that comes from two people standing on opposite sides of the truth. I rebuilt myself in that space, piece by piece, like restoring corrupted data, slow, deliberate, irreversible. Every so often, I drive past the old house. The porch light's different, the paint's new, but the silence feels the same. I park for a minute, then keep driving. Some ghosts don't haunt. They just remind you that you survived them. Quiet isn't revenge. It's recovery. And sometimes, it's the only language worth speaking. What would you have done in my place? If the story hit you, leave a like. And don't forget to subscribe. It only gets stronger from here.